The day started out like any other until work threw a real emergency at me. I barely had a second to think, swamped by a stack of new test data for a project we'd been grinding on for the last month. Even though the job was as monotonous as it gets, I had to be meticulous, logging and sorting everything down to the smallest detail. Then, just as I was getting into the rhythm, my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, figuring it could wait. But after a minute, I gave in and checked it. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize, though the area code was local. I nearly dismissed it as spam but hesitated. Maybe it was a colleague using a different number. When I finally opened it, my brain short-circuited for a second. There was a close-up photo staring back at me that I had in no way expected to see. A woman's intimate parts, looking distinctly still fresh. A message followed. "Look closely, you still have time. Dominic's 6 p.m. At first, I laughed, chalking it up to some sleazy misdial or prank. But then I noticed a tiny, sickening detail. A mole that was only too familiar. It was unmistakably my wife Sofia's. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it had to be a mistake. But panic crept in. Questions ricocheted through my mind. She was supposed to be on a flight to Boston, leaving her no time for any of this. The message timestamp didn't line up with her flight's supposed landing at 4:30 p.m., but maybe she was caught up in work. I tried to brush it off, but something was off. Trying to keep my composure, I replied to the message. Not exactly subtle, but I expected more creativity. "Who is this? Where'd you get that photo? Am I supposed to meet you at Dominic's?" Then, I texted Sofia. "How was the flight? I'm grabbing a bite. Call me when you're free." I kept it casual, masking the gnawing dread as I headed out. As I made my way to my car, my phone buzzed again. Thinking it was her, I checked, but it was another text from the mystery sender. "I'll be there, but I bet you'll find someone more interesting than me." My gut twisted. Whoever this was knew something I didn't. I checked my map. Dominic's was half an hour away, and it was already 5:40. I'd be cutting it close. As I drove, another message came in. This time it was Sofia. "Crazy day with the team. I'll call you before bed. Love you." Her words felt empty now, the warmth replaced by a chill in my chest. My mind zeroed in on Dominic's, hoping for answers but dreading what I might find. I parked outside Dominic's at 6:05, close enough. Walking in, I scanned the dimly lit space. It took a second for my eyes to adjust, but I spotted a dining area ahead, with a bar to the left. I chose a seat at the far end of the bar, ordered a beer, and tried to keep my composure. Just then, I saw him, a guy handing out drinks to a table of laughing people. And there she was, my wife, Sofia, dolled up in that black dress and pearls, her smile bright as the day we met. Except this time it wasn't for me. I moved toward her, feeling like I was on autopilot. The closer I got, the more her smile faltered, turning to wide-eyed panic. Without thinking, I reached over and grabbed the well-dressed guy's hair, yanking him backward. He stumbled, spilling drinks as I pulled him down. He yelped as he hit the floor, and I recognized him. Nathan, one of her teammates. I told him to stay down, and he didn't argue, looking up at me with a mix of fear and embarrassment. The table went silent, her colleagues staring at me like deer in headlights. These were people who'd sat at my dinner table, shared drinks in my home, people I trusted. I glanced around, realizing one of them had tipped me off, but figuring out who felt pointless now. Turning to Sofia, I told her I was going home and that if she wanted a shot at saving our marriage, she should come with me now. She nodded but didn't move right away. I glanced over at her teammates, making a point to call out two of them, Carla and Paul. I asked Carla if her husband, Alex, thought she was in Boston, and Paul if his wife, Jenna, believed he was on a trip too. Their averted eyes gave me all the answers I needed. As I left, I couldn't help but wonder just how far the team's little secrets went. The drive home felt like a bad dream. I stumbled into the house and cracked open a beer, slumping in the living room and replaying it all in my head. Part of me wanted to reach out to our friends, maybe warn Alex or Jenna, but I decided not to. Instead, I sent a quick group text. "Looks like Sofia's plans changed. You might want to check in with your spouses. Let them handle their own messes. About 20 minutes later, I heard the garage door open. She walked in, still in that dress but without the heels or pearls. She sat across from me, quiet, waiting for me to speak. I let the silence drag on, making her squirm. Finally, she broke, trying to tell me, "It's not what you think." I raised a hand to stop her. "You have no idea what I think," I said, my voice calm but cold. "I don't need some long story. We both know that explanations are just excuses. So let's cut to it. How long? How many times? Do our friends know? Beyond the ones at the table, who else? Am I the guy everyone laughs at behind his back?" "No, Leo, it's not like that," she insisted, scrambling to explain. "Our travel plans changed last minute, and instead of flying home, Nathan suggested we stay here for a down day. I wasn't buying it. Where was the rest of the team then? I didn't see all of you there." She hesitated. "Some stayed home and planned to meet us at the airport tomorrow. But you chose to lie to me," I replied, feeling my patience wear thin. "Seems like you're close with Nathan. Anything between you and him?" Sofia just looked away, trying to deflect. "Nathan even convinced the owners at Dominic's not to press charges," she offered, as if that made things better. "I couldn't care less about your colleague. If he hadn't slipped, I would have hit him. Jail time means nothing to me. I've been there before. Would have been interesting, actually." I shot her a wry smile, but there was no humor in it. "Do you love him?" The silence stretched between us, and I could tell she was choosing her words carefully. "Nathan isn't my boyfriend," she finally managed. "There's nothing going on between us like you're thinking." Sure, I should have mentioned the change in travel plans, but it was trivial. You weren't expecting me home anyway, whether I was in Boston or here. I was still dedicated to the team, and we were just grabbing a bite before heading to our rooms. You had no reason to humiliate me in front of everyone like that. Without a word, I pulled out my phone, opened the text, and slid it across the table toward her. She went pale as her eyes landed on the image. This time, she knew there was no talking her way out of it. "Sofia," I began, my voice low and steady. "Our team has always been tight-knit. We're a small group, everyone meets regularly, pulls late nights. I've been working my tail off for that proposal. But this? I don't know exactly when things shifted, but you're telling me it just evolved after Nathan became the project manager." She looked at the ground and nodded, any boldness gone. "Let me guess. Almost 6 months ago, right around when Nathan came on board?" She gave a small nod. I could barely keep the disgust off my face. "And your whole team, all of you were in on this arrangement?" I didn't need to say it out loud. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. "Nathan says it's about fostering trust and building team unity," she replied, almost with pride. "I actually feel more connected to him and the team than I ever have before." I could see she still didn't get it. "Well, don't get too attached to that team," I told her, my tone a warning. "Things are going to change, starting now." She gasped, fear finally breaking through her confidence. "Leo, you can't involve other people in this. You'll ruin more than just us. You'll destroy people's lives, their marriages, and their careers. We need to focus on fixing us. Just leave them out of it." "Fix us?" I replied with a bitter laugh. "I care about our friends, Sofia, Paul, and Jenna, for instance. They deserve to know the truth. I actually like them a whole lot more than Carla and Alex right now. So yes, I texted Paul and Jenna about your change of plans. They can handle it however they see fit. But I'm not going to pretend anymore." Sofia's face twisted in anger. "Leo, do you even understand what you're doing? This team, we've done more for CR Inc. than any team in company history. And you've benefited from it too. Just because our team meetings were on Wednesdays doesn't mean you ever went without anything you wanted from me. So yes, I slept with the team. Big deal. You never even noticed that photo I just saw. Want to know what's going on? This picture was taken right after I was with Nathan. Yes, he came inside your wife. And what you didn't see was Carla right there, taking the photo before she joined in. You didn't notice, so it didn't happen, right? I felt like I'd been punched. The sheer audacity, the contempt, the deceit. It was all there, laid bare, like she was challenging me to throw away all they'd built. She was almost seething now, her voice shaking with rage, and my blood boiled. For a split second on the drive home from Dominic's, I had thought maybe I could forgive Nathan just this once. But that thought was dead and gone now, smothered under every vile word that poured from her mouth. But she wasn't finished. "Oh no, Leo, you're not getting off that easy. You're going to text Paul and Jenna back. Right now? And tell them that you heard from me and that we were stuck in Atlanta but will be on a morning flight. That's the story." She glared at me. "And Carla and Alex are backing it up. You'll fall in line too." I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. "And then what, Sofia? We're supposed to discuss our next steps like nothing's happened." "There's nothing left to discuss. You're leaving tonight. Go back to your precious team and your ringleader, Nathan. I'm done. Tomorrow I'll be talking to a lawyer and we'll start splitting things up. Simple, fair. You keep your retirement, I keep mine. You want to see Boston? Go ahead. Take those reservations and celebrate with your crew." "Leo, please listen," she said, her tone softening into something dangerously close to begging. "If Carla or Alex walk away before the pitch, we're talking millions. You and I could miss out on six-figure bonuses. Think about what that kind of money could mean for us. Let's forget all this and get back on track. Nathan says I'm set to rise quickly, maybe even an executive role if I keep up the momentum. Isn't that something we've both wanted? Sofia, get out," I managed to say before I felt a sudden, sharp blow to my back. I stumbled forward, my breath leaving me as someone pushed me down, a knee pressing into my back. I gasped for air, but the pain in my ribs burned with each breath. "Not too rough," Sofia's voice broke in, but her tone was indifferent, almost an afterthought. "Oh, still deciding on whether you'd like to break my nose?" Nathan's voice jeered from above me, his face inches from mine as I lay helpless on the floor. My mind raced, piecing it together. She'd set me up. "Let's see whose nose gets broken tonight," Nathan sneered, ordering someone to grab my phone and type those texts for me, insisting we didn't have time for any more resistance. Rough hands pulled me upright. I staggered, feigning injury, forcing my captor to strain, and I noted their wheezing, an out-of-shape office worker. With every painful breath, I focused my mind, recalibrating. Unlike Nathan and his team, I was part of a field crew that worked directly with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, SOAR, out of Fort Campbell. My team wasn't elite, but we worked closely with those who were. We spent hours out in the field alongside SOAR, learning not just about engineering but about survival. Those soldiers were the reason we took such pride in what we did. One of those soldiers, Master Sergeant Thomas Green, was a legend, a man who led missions from the backwoods of Kentucky to the jungles of Colombia. Everyone respected him, from fresh recruits to high-ranking officers. And one night, in one of those rare moments between missions, Sergeant Green taught us a thing or two. "You never know when you'll need it," he said, running us through the basics of self-defense. "Odds are, the biggest threat you'll face is a jammed copier or a paper cut. But this line of work, you never know. Better to be prepared." I kept my face blank, pretending to surrender while every move was calculated, and Green's training echoed in my mind. Because right now, that paper cut felt a lot more like a knife at my back. I focused on steadying my breathing, keeping my captor convinced I'd surrendered while recalling Sergeant Green's advice. "Sometimes, it feels like all you can do is take the beating," he'd once said. "But remember, even when you're down, you can still fight back, if you're smart about it." So I played the part, subtly straining just enough to wear down this one guy holding me. Nathan barked at me, glaring with a sneer. "Give me the phone, Leo. Now you know I've been with your wife along with every other guy on the team. So drop the tough guy act, because you're nothing but a weak, compliant little nerd. Do what we say, and maybe you'll still get a turn with her when the team's done. Think of the bonus. Maybe that'll help ease the sting." He smirked, going on, "Hell, Maybe Sofia will even buy you a little toy, a Kishon robot for when she's busy. I flared with rage, but held back, biting my tongue. When Nathan leaned closer to grab my phone from my shirt pocket, I sprang into action. In a few seconds, the two men were lying on the floor crying in pain. I spun around, prepared for whoever might come at me next, and spotted Alex, lying on the floor in tears, clutching his leg and whining about his broken foot. I put my boot down on his foot, hard, and he screamed. "Just clearing up any confusion," I said coldly. Turning back, I saw Nathan still on the floor, shielding his face with his hands, struggling to rise. I knelt down and leaned in close to his ear. "Looks like your nose took one for the team," I whispered. Then I applied another hold and he passed out, stretched out on the floor. My heart raced, my breath ragged as I scanned the room for Sofia. Out of nowhere, a sharp blow landed on my back, knocking me to my knees. I whipped around and saw Sofia standing there, a cast iron skillet in her hand. Her swing had just grazed me, but it had been close. I rose to my feet, grabbing the pan out of her hand. "Leo," she said, desperate now, "we can still work this out. Think about what you'd be throwing away all the money we're making. I'll end things with Nathan and the others. We can go back to how things were." I rubbed the back of my head, staring at her. She looked like a stranger, like one of those alien creatures in the thing, shape-shifting to adapt to the situation. I couldn't help a bitter smirk. She misunderstood my reaction and reached to hug me, but I stopped her with my hand. She slipped, shrieked, and collapsed to the floor. "Yeah, it hurts, doesn't it?" I said, looking at her as she tried to breathe through the pain. "Blurs your vision, makes it hard to catch your breath. Works every time." She looked up at me, crying. "Why did you hit me?" she managed to gasp out. "Because I could," I said, stone-faced. I kept recording, my phone capturing every word, every image. In the back of my mind, I remembered Green's advice about taking decisive action, not hesitating. I looked around the room, taking in the wreckage. Alex, curled up on the floor, whimpered, and Sofia's nose swelled and twisted. I felt a surge of satisfaction at having taken control, but there was still unfinished business. Kneeling down beside her, I began the conversation. "Sofia," I said, almost calmly, "what were you thinking? Is climbing the corporate ladder really worth this?" She looked away, guilt creeping into her expression. "It could have been if you hadn't messed things up for me," she mumbled. "And what about us?" I pressed. "The marriage, the years we've spent together, every lie you've spun? There's always a future, Leo. There's always a way to make things work," she said, though I could tell she didn't believe it. "Nathan warned me about you. He told me you'd never understand, that you'd cling to your outdated ideas of loyalty and honesty. He said if I wanted to get ahead, I had to break free from that." "When exactly did Nathan give you this sage advice?" I asked, my voice hard as steel. She looked back, defiant. "You don't know anything about my relationship with Nathan. Listening to your advice about doing things the right way never got me anywhere but a few pats on the back. Then Carla showed me how things really worked for women. Mixing business with a little pleasure? Not only does it work, it's a lot more fun." I let her words sink in, still recording, piecing together how long this had really been going on. "So when did this all start? Was Nathan your first?" Impatient, she rolled her eyes. "I started this game back at the company Christmas party, a year after I joined CR Inc. I've been following this path ever since." I shook my head, barely believing what I was hearing. "So it's not just Nathan, is it? Victor James, too?" She lifted her chin defiantly. "Yes, Leo. Victor, Nathan, Alex, anyone who could give me an edge. It costs me nothing to share a little intimacy. You men are so easy to manipulate, always led by your urges. It's practically laughable." My heart sank as she kept talking, her contempt laid bare, each word twisting like a knife in my gut. She'd been living a lie for years, and here she was, telling me exactly how she'd used me, and anyone else in her way, to climb to the top as if it was something to be proud of. Sofia leaned back, her tone smug, a twisted smile on her face. A little bit of cleavage goes a long way. I could make you, or any man for that matter, dance to my tune without much effort. She seemed almost proud of her manipulations. Victor already knows we're here, she continued, her eyes gleaming with confidence. He's gathering the team and spinning up a story for why we're missing. They'll have to handle the pitch without us, but the extra effort we put in with those purchasing managers will make it worth their while. I raised an eyebrow, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Extra effort, huh? You always were a go-getter, Sofia. She laughed. Effort? Hardly. You know how men are. They're practically begging to make things easy. The worst of them? Still pretty great as far as I'm concerned. She paused, recalling something. But Rachel, that one took a little more work. She's the only woman on the selection board and was a bit harder to sway. Turns out she was curious enough about women to need a little persuasion. Nathan helped me out there. So this is where you're at now, Sofia? I asked, disgusted. If everything's supposedly in the bag, why the strong-arm tactics here? She rolled her eyes. Nathan's idea. He wanted to play the big shot. I told him I could just come home, deal with you myself, and still make the flight, but no, he insisted on this stunt. Now, instead of celebrating a done deal, here I am dealing with you and this mess. You think you could have just bought me off? I shot back. Maybe not, she replied with a shrug. But I would have been on that plane. Well, you're definitely not catching that flight now, I said, eyeing her, wondering how Nathan had been so in the know. I had a suspicion she was carrying some kind of transmitter. Victor, are you listening? I asked loudly. I'm about to call the cops. I'm pretty sure we're dealing with a whole slew of felonies here, and we haven't even touched on the fraud angle. It's a federal contract, isn't it? I could practically hear Victor wince from wherever he was listening. Yeah, the feds don't take kindly to, how did you put it, extra effort, I added. I'm sure you've got good lawyers, Victor. But there might be another way out. Sofia's phone suddenly rang with her tacky, "Hail to the chief" ringtone. She picked up, looking at me as she answered, Victor. She hit the speaker button, and Victor's voice filled the room. First, let me apologize, he began, his voice smooth as ever. Nathan showed poor judgment, and I assure you the board will be addressing his actions. Oh, that's a relief, I replied, sarcasm heavy in my voice. Great to know you and the board take things like assault and fraud seriously. These are unfortunate allegations, Victor continued, his tone unfazed. Lawyers will get involved, but let's be realistic. Nobody wants this blowing up. Maybe we pay a fine. Maybe Nathan and Alex get some community service. But in the end, Leo, you'll end up divorced and half as wealthy. I considered his words for a moment. So, is there an alternative, Victor? Sofia always said you were the clever one. Yes, there's an or. We at CR are already a part of your wife's life, and when you found out and reacted, well, let's say you didn't handle it gracefully. Surprising, I interrupted dryly. Leo, Victor pressed on. How about we strike a deal? I just sent a little snap to Sofia's phone. Have a look. It might restore some goodwill. Sofia opened the snap, holding her phone out to show me. On the screen was a bank logo for the Grand Cayman Bank with a substantial balance. When does that hit my account? I asked, trying to sound detached. It's there already. You'll find an email with the account number, Victor replied. This has been a hard day for you, Leo. But let's be practical. Emotions don't keep the lights on. No, they don't, I said, mimicking Victor's upper crust tone. CR will cover the divorce costs. Sofia will file, take her personal belongings and retirement. Simple enough, right? I stood there weighing my options. I could hold my ground and blow this whole thing open. Consequences be damned. Or I could walk away, 5 million reasons tempting me to choose the latter. Victor, I asked, you've got a medical team, don't you? Yes, we have physicians on retainer, he answered smoothly. Good, I said. Send a few over in a limo to pick up your team. Do we have an agreement? Precisely, Victor replied, voice clipped and formal. Goodbye, Victor, I said, ending the call. I slipped my phone into my pocket, turning off the recording app as I did. Sofia gave me a victorious smile, though her face was already showing signs of bruising. I knew you'd see reason, Leo. Maybe, when this all cools down, we can still have something. Friends with benefits. She leaned in as if to kiss me, misreading my silence. I lifted a hand, gently pushing her back until she fell onto the couch. Disgust welled up inside me as I looked down at her. Why on earth would I want to kiss you? I asked, letting every bit of contempt show in my voice. She flinched, visibly hurt. Take what you want from the house, I told her coldly. By tomorrow, I don't want to see you here. I turned toward the door, pausing just long enough beside Alex, who was still curled up on the floor. How's the foot? I asked, not waiting for his answer before I kicked him hard in the groin, watching him crumple with a new wave of pain. I moved over to Nathan, who'd managed to sit up, holding his face. Relax, I'm done hitting you, I said, though he looked wary as I pressed my foot down onto his groin too. He writhed and gasped as I walked away, leaving him hunched over. Once outside, I climbed into my car without a clear plan. All I knew was that I needed food and somewhere to crash. I swung by a drive-thru for a burger, and then found a Red Roof Inn on the edge of town, near the freeway. As soon as I lay down, exhaustion took over, and I was asleep before my head hit the pillow. When his phone buzzed the next morning, Leo eagerly picked it up, reading a message from an unfamiliar number. Sorry about yesterday. Can we meet at TGIF at the mall? I'll wave you over to the bar.
Sean.
I'll be there, Leo replied, pouring the lukewarm coffee into a paper cup, his mind already turning over what Sean might have to say. Determined to set things in order, he booted up his laptop to check his bank accounts. He thought back to his college economics professor, who'd always advised them to keep a go-to-hell fund offshore for emergencies. With his professor's help, he'd opened an account in the Cayman Islands and had saved over $50,000 over the years. This morning, he was adding a significant boost to it. Logging into the bank's secure site, he transferred the bulk of the recent payout into his own account, leaving $100,000 in the original Cayman account. After a quick shower and change, Leo headed to TGIF, arriving just past noon. Spotting a man around his age waving from the bar, Leo approached and took a seat. You sent the text? He asked. Yeah, I'm sorry for how this all went down. There wasn't a good way to break the news to you, Sean began. Start with who you are and how you're involved with Sofia, Leo replied, keeping his tone measured.
Sean nadie.
I was part of the team, but only for a few months. After 8 years in the Army, I was medically discharged and joined CR around 6 months ago. 3 months in, they put me on Nathan's team. When I mentioned Sofia's name to a friend of mine, he recognized it. Turns out we shared a mutual friend, and he asked me to keep an eye on her. First, it was fine, but after a couple of months, Sofia, well, she made her move. She's very persuasive, and I admit I was tempted, but when I asked about her ring, she just smiled and said you were fine with it. I wasn't. When I told her no, things went downhill fast. I got every lousy assignment Nathan could think of and constant grief. Sean paused, gathering his thoughts. I called our mutual friend to tell him what was happening. He said it didn't sound like you'd be okay with it and that you needed to know. That's when Nathan sent me an incentive. A photo of Sofia as a sort of reward if I played along. I couldn't stomach it, so I resigned yesterday and sent you that text. Who's this mutual friend? Leo asked, though he had a feeling he already knew. Thomas Green. He helped me out of a rough spot when I was a rookie. I owed him one. We both do, Leo replied, nodding in appreciation. What are you planning to do now?
Sean Said.
Victor already laid it all out for me. I could go to the cops, but with CR's lawyers, it'd barely make a dent for them. And meanwhile, Sofia, Alex, Nathan, they keep climbing the ladder. We made a deal. Maybe you think I'm selling out, and maybe I am, but they took something from me I can't get back. So I'll take the payout and move on. Tell Thomas I'm grateful, but I won't be going back. Leo nodded, understanding more than he cared to admit. What about you? He asked Sean. Thomas mentioned Baxter Incorporated as a good place. Now that you're gone, they might need another engineer, and they do things right, challenging but clean work. Not as flashy as Sofia's team, but it's honest. Sean stood up, giving Leo a respectful nod. They shared a silent understanding before Sean walked away. By Monday, Leo had already checked in for his flight to Costa Rica. Looking forward to unwinding in Tamarindo, he made his way to security. Just before he reached the checkpoint, he spotted a mailbox. He pulled out a small envelope addressed to the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. Inside was a thumb drive containing the recording he'd made. He figured it might catch their interest. Maybe CR's legal team wasn't as untouchable as they thought. Dropping the envelope in the slot, he headed through security. 9 months later, Leo sat at his usual table in a small Costa Rican cafe, enjoying the warm breeze and a cold beer. Anna, the waitress, brought him an envelope along with his drink. "Gracias, Anna," he said, raising his bottle. He eyed the envelope, wondering who'd tracked him down in this quiet little beach town. He hadn't exactly been hiding, but it would have taken some effort to find him here. His first thought was Victor's people, but he decided to wait a couple of days to make sure it wasn't anything dangerous. When he finally felt confident enough to open it, he called out to Carlos, the cafe owner. "Carlos."
Te necesito.
"Yes, Senor Leo," Carlos replied. Leo handed him the envelope and stepped back a few paces. "Better safe than sorry," he muttered. Carlos opened it, then handed the contents back to him. Leo thanked him, took another sip of his beer, and emptied the envelope onto the table. A few sheets of paper spilled out. On top was a note that read, "Thought you'd find this interesting," with a phone number scribbled below. Thomas, Leo thought, smiling. Thomas would have the means to track him down if anyone could. He turned over the next sheet and found a newspaper article. There was a picture of Nathan, Alex, Sofia, and Carla being led out of CR's headquarters in handcuffs. The headline read, "For indicted in multimillion-dollar procurement fraud." Leo couldn't help but chuckle. Maybe Victor's lawyers weren't as bulletproof as he thought, he murmured, a habit he'd picked up as he adjusted to the language barrier. It was oddly comforting to hear his own voice in English, even if no one else could understand it. "Ana otra cerveza," he called, holding up his empty bottle.
Sí, señor.
"Gracias," Anna replied, handing him another. Leo raised his beer, taking in the vast expanse of the deep blue Pacific stretching out before him. "Sofia who?" he muttered with a smile, letting the satisfaction settle as he savored his freedom and the quiet life he'd found here on the coast.